Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live here on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people at Folgers Coffee who've been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much, and it just would not be the same without you. Also, big thank you for his contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for our intro and outro, which you don't get to hear very often. Justin Snicker, a.k.a. Dr. Snick the Sonic Surgeon, who is an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on any of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind our banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the Halloween genre. However, does phenomenal pieces, books, comic books, you name it. This guy does it. Just amazing, amazing work. Tonight, we welcome back Chris Styles, who's going to be discussing the Cape Sable Island UFO, I guess, sighting. It was a pretty interesting sighting. We're going to be showing some of the film clips for this evening, but he's got, some new discoveries on UFO disclosure and how it affects Canada, I guess. So lots to talk about. And he's also an upcoming speaker, of course, on the Halifax Paranormal Symposium coming up on October the 7th. So I'm sure he'll talk about that a little bit also. So yeah, fun packed night, I think. UFOs, this whole disclosure thing, I feel like I'm having a deja vu from like 2 years ago, but it's just like a whole other thing, and it's really being talked about like pretty full force, actually.
Yeah, completely different.
Yeah,
it's different now. The conversation's different now. It's we want to know if how long they've been here, how many have come over the years, and it's a different it's different questions.
No, absolutely. I mean, we'll see, right? I'll say, how are you from Texas? Is it still hot in Texas, Janie? That means it's really been hot in Texas. So, but different, admitting a little bit, to extraterrestrial life as well. I don't know. What are you doing? A lot of people really risk their reputations and they risk their lives to come out and talk about something. I mean, why? Why would somebody do that unless there's something to it? Bob Lazar is like that's a perfect example. Now it's kind of like, told you. Yes. Yeah. Yes, we know, right? So
there's few of them that have gone, that have passed, that are probably going, hello.
Yeah.
It's funny how many news clips are coming up, especially with the disclosure and even with climate change. You're seeing news clips from 10 years ago when 7 years from that time we were supposed to be completely dissolved and gone, and then the time changes, and then they were saying as well, and it's funny how they incorporate climate change and ET at the same time.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I find this whole climate change is sort of a like a buzzword, like a new buzz terminology. But yes, I think there's a lot of major things that are happening right now just in time for disclosure. Some people are curious. Some people want to know about it. Some people not really. So I guess you know what? It's just some people are interested, but it's not a thing in their lives one way or another. I think for
It-
people who are experiencers, this is like, yay, okay. It's like a bit of a win, right? So, but our guest of honor is here. Let's bring him
Yay.
on in. Hello.
Hello, Michelle and
Hi.
Amelia.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm like a teenager.
Excellent. I like to
love
hear
it.
that.
Well, filled with cosmic angst, but
Right.
if only it were true.
If only.
Mm.
I love it. I love it. So you've been a busy guy. You've been out speaking, and how
Yes.
did that go for you?
Yeah. Well, it's been good. I've been book sales have been brisk on the new book on Shelburne, and in a way, it's I think
Beautiful.
it's kind of getting a push from the whole amount of attention disclosure is getting, because I think the case is another example of what happened to this film they shot. For example, Under the Water, that
Mm,
was dropped off at a government depot as early as 1960, which, if it's as described to me, and I accept the testimony, it would be conclusive proof of,
mhm.
extraterrestrial entities being here as early as that. And of course, they were here long before that.
Right.
Mm.
Right. So, why don't we start there then, and work our way to, the Cape Sable Island sighting.
Mhm.
We'll have a little bit of a build up to it. Um, Obviously, people such as yourself who have been in the field for a lot of years and
Mhm.
you've done a lot of research. Um, what does this word disclosure mean for you guys and for yourself? Because didn't we just do
Oh,
this 2 years ago?
yeah. Look, it means different things to different people, right?
Right.
And look, some of the things that have come out under this are certainly worthwhile and give some insight. But I'm kind of underwhelmed by the thing myself. I'm not firmly in that disclosure camp. I think everybody in this field has to work together from different angles, right?
Mhm.
And you got to understand, I'm 68 now.
No
And
way.
yeah, I'm 60.
Thought you said you're a
No,
teenager.
no.
I don't know. Really?
Yeah.
I'm really surprised by that. I'm being serious. I'm not. You don't look at it all like that. Island life must be really amazing.
I I don't.
Living out on the East Coast must be the best thing
It's the
ever,
salt air. I'm about 30
right?
feet from it in the house.
Oh,
Beautiful.
I
yeah.
know that.
Stop rubbing it in. You did that last time. I was so jealous. I was angry for days.
Yeah, yeah, I'm very lucky, to have this little house like that. I can actually throw a rock into the ocean,
That's
and
beautiful.
That's awesome.
I'm on the other side of the road even, but I can still do it.
I love
Yeah.
it.
You look fabulous, Chris. I'm being honest. You look fantastic.
I
I wouldn't have guessed it.
It's
I
like,
would
why
have
am I
guessed you
here again? What
closer
are we
to our
talking about?
age. I would have guessed you. I would have guessed you closer to Michelle and I. That's why I was really surprised.
okay, and I'm not gonna ask, so,
Thank you.
yeah. But
Yeah,
no,
shut up,
well,
Bubbles.
no,
I'm 54. I put it out there, but yeah.
I'll tell you something, as I was getting older, and no, I don't feel 68. I'm not sure what that's supposed to feel like, but I can remember the first time the number had any meaning for me whatsoever was when I turned 50, half a century. And people gave me cards, and when I it said happy birthday, happy 50th or whatever, and when I saw 50, I was like, my reaction was 50. That can't be right. I'm not
Where was
50.
I? Yeah.
Yeah, the rest of it, the other numbers had no meaning, and that was it. And now 50 is a distant memory, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't look it.
Older
So
and
So
wiser.
where were we before you
I
derailed me? And you did,
know.
I
Amelia.
did, didn't I? I'm sorry.
This is
Disclosure.
your
I've just
fault. You
you really
derailed me.
shocked me. You shocked me with that one. But
Disclosure
You're
meaning
easily
something
shocked.
different for everybody else,
I'm
or
not.
Yeah. Oh
different for
yeah.
everyone
Okay.
working together
Disclosure.
within the
Yes.
field. Okay.
Yeah. And I am not anti-disclosure. I have a lot of friends that firmly are into that label, right? But I'll tell you, even my memory before I get into the field in childhood, tell you what my introduction really was to notice ufology as, you know, as a field and the phenomena itself. It actually wasn't Shag Harbour, which I was 12 when that occurred. I was somewhere around 8 or 9 and had the chicken pox. And I was home and watching. I'm not sure if we had 1 or 2 stations here in Halifax in the day. This is before cable, black and white television, right?
Mm.
And I'm sitting there covered in calamine lotion from having the
Oh,
virus.
I remember that stuff.
Yeah, you know. And I was one of these ones. I didn't get the little thing here anyway because I didn't pick it. But you know, anyway, I'm watching television, and you know, and I'm feeling guilty, probably the Catholic in me at the time, because I didn't feel sick. You're just itching all over, right? I'm
Right.
watching TV, and a movie came on, and it's a feature documentary, docudrama. Don't know if you've encountered it or heard of it. You probably have. It's called Unidentified Flying Objects: The Motion Picture.
No.
And anybody interested in the field should watch this. It's hard to find a good copy of it. It was
Mhm.
made in the 50s. And I know I've suggested it to people and researchers. I can remember a lot of people saying, look, I haven't seen that in 20, 30 years. I got to watch that again. And I tell them it'll charge your batteries because it's before so many things happen. But even in that early period, back then, there were 2 large grassroots UFO groups in the U.S. NICAP was the largest with about 12,000 members back in the day. And APRO would eventually morph into MUFON, you know,
Right.
with the passing of the Lorenzens and that.
Mhm.
And these 2 groups were diametrically opposed. And even though I was a boy, I used to watch, you know, when somebody like Coral or Jim Lorenzen was a guest on things like The Tonight Show, believe it or not. You know, this is before the internet, of course, and before that. And when something came on, good, bad, or indifferent UFO, you know, you had to grab it. You had to get it right there. You couldn't record it. God knows when you'd see it again. But one thing became apparent before I started reading the books. And when books came out like the UFO Experience, I was a young guy reading them and just entranced by it. But I wasn't involved, of course. But the thing was, NICAP was very much, the argument was run by Major Kehoe that, you know, it was very much along the modern concept of disclosure, right? And we all need to lobby the government and work together, and they've got the secrets, and, you know, at some point it'll be revealed. APRO, on the other hand, was the entire opposite. It's like, get out the armchair, get out yourself, and get the answers. You can't trust the government. And if the government tells you, you probably couldn't believe it anyway. You're going to have to get the evidence yourself, right?
Right.
And you know, I was always more in that camp. But, you know, as time went on, and particularly once I got involved in the field, and by the way, officially, that would have been April 1992 that I decided, you know, I'm going to figure out if there's life after high school, and I've got to get and see if there's anything true to any of this, you know, because it had always fascinated me.
Right.
And I was quickly over my head before I knew it, you know. And but you know, I've always found that that APRO sentiment stayed with me. But after seeing the bickering and going to my first few U.S. conferences to speak about my work on Shag Harbour in the early years, became apparent there was much too much division in the field. And I think everybody contributes to it, and we all have to work from all angles because, you know, a lot of what you do don't work. And if there's a lesson in my new book there about the Shelburne case, Sweet Clear
Yes.
5, when you look at
Yes.
all the failures over the first half, everything I tried, you know, I think it cries out for the fact that we need the talents of all these people and the different approaches, including disclosure, you know, and, you know, we need an open mind. We need detente between the different fractions, you know.
Right. I agree. And I think there are so many people in the field now that, I mean, there are those who, like we were saying before you came on, take a lot of risks, you know,
Yes,
talking about the
yes,
information that they know. So they're really taking chances. Then you have those organizations who just, they'll investigate UFOs, but they don't really want to talk about extraterrestrial life or terrestrial life because, like you say, they many of them have already been here the whole time. So I don't know. How do you find that happy medium? I mean, some people take the risk, other people like, nah, we're gonna play it cool.
Well, I'm not sure there's a happy medium.
Right.
Each of us is happy when for
Yeah.
some people might be happy in the middle. Some of us are out on the fringe with the
Yeah.
extreme,
Mm-hmm.
and it's, for example, like I've always been very open and much more comfortable reading the works and considering some of the European concepts, and of course the work of, here Jacques Vallée and that,
Jacques Vallée,
where
yeah.
things aren't all nuts and bolts, but there's room for nuts and bolts,
Yes. Yes.
And this is what I find outside of Shag Harbour and Shelburne, for example. All the sort of lesser cases I've investigated in Atlantic Canada, I've found that many of them involve these in between states. They involve reality transformations, they involve a physical reality, but there's something much greater than that going on here. There's
Mhm.
controlled witness perception by the phenomena, whether it's aliens or interdimensional or time travelers, whatever is ultimately
Yes.
behind it, right?
Right.
And when I first got into this, it's inevitable. I used to spend a lot of time, Michelle, speculating about what's behind this, and you know, I had these lofty goals of where you're going to take it, but too many sleepless nights. And now, you know what? I leave that end of it to greater minds. What I'm trying to do is just gather the evidence and drag it into the light of day. And I think I've done that in some cases. And Shelburne will probably keep me busy, if I keep healthy for another 30 years, just like Shag Harbour did. And
Right.
I've got
Right.
a lot to do. But what I've discovered is that there's a lot of changes when I listen to the hearings, and I haven't listened to them all, but that were on there. And when I hear some of the discussions by the people that were attending to them just in the audience, there's a lot of speculation about what's going on and who knows what and who steps in. A lot of the information is amazingly out of date, I find, because 10 years ago, for example, in Canada, the lines were redrawn. There was a time when CSIS played a big role in, making sure things may be tucked away that you could access in the phenomena. I mean, most of the time, most of the staff, most of their mission was in other areas more important to them in terms of the safety of the nation or its communications.
Babysitting dignitaries.
But there is a division. But about 10 years ago, a lot of people missed this. There was a redrawing of the lines between CSIS and the Canadian Forces Intelligence Command. And where these things spill over in the military matters, a lot of them now are handled by what's known as JTFX, Joint Task Force X. Now, most of us have heard of JTF2, which is Canada's Special Forces. That played part in roles like Afghanistan, working.
Yeah, they would be the American level of the Marines and Navy.
But I've heard very little to the fact that they actually have, and it tends to be working at overseas military operations. But I've been hearing more and more claims and stories from people I interview and from agencies of the presence of JTFX. And at first I thought, is there really such a division that deals with X-Files? Well, it's not just that. It traces its history to Camp X in Britain and the intelligence community and that, right? But they do have such a thing, and it was hard to find a whole lot about it other than a sentence or two on Wikipedia or something. But I kept looking, and people tell me, well, on a slow day, they might be given an assignment here, and it might involve something like the phenomena, clearing out a desk file once they become aware of it, Well, of all places, I went online and went to the Governor General's website and tried to see if there had been any shoulder badges approved, for uniforms. And didn't I find one for JTFX? And then I found the symbol of the unit and the motto and its mission and everything. And, you went to Wikipedia and it describes how it's hard to hear anything. It's in secret. but
Right.
an awful lot was revealed, right? Typical Canada on the Governor General
Yeah,
website.
right. Yeah.
And
Mm.
yeah, it was quite amazing. I thought, it's like that commercial you sometimes see here, Christmas with Santa, where he faints and he goes, "I do exist," and falls down. And I thought afterwards, I said, how could it be that easy? And how many people have missed this? You know what I mean? So
Hidden in plain sight.
hidden in plain sight. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I'm
So-
sure when they're cleaning out desk drawers and files and that for people that may have pulled what I call a Phil Corso, and
Right.
kept some alien evidence in the desk drawer, if they catch wind of that years later. And arguably, you look at the Shelburne case, the film, that could be sitting in some scientist's desk up there, and that could be all revealed. But what can I do about that? I'll tell you what disturbed me about, I was watching some of the speculation online and podcasts. I'm not going to name any names, and one of the things they were suggesting is that this letter that Larry McGuire wrote was a great thing in that, and it got brushed off by our defense minister at the time, Anita Anand. When I read the letter, what bothered me was not the body of text, but at the bottom, the CC list, the last name on it, Major General Michael Wright, in charge of JTFX. So, at that time, since the defense minister dismissed the concerns of Larry McGuire and a lot of other people, and since the policy had yet to change and she wouldn't acknowledge what this government and others may hold in our Five Eye partners, if he's looking after his mission, he'll have to go on after anything now and clean it out because it hasn't changed. But he was, that concern went directly to him, and that's one of their missions, to keep the lid on it.
That wasn't very the code name for the file wasn't very bright.
Well, it's really odd. And over the years, this could explain a few things. Even in the early 90s, when CSIS was had the exclusive rights to keeping the lid on this thing, I would request things from Canadian agencies such as the Directorate of History at D&D headquarters, or of course what was called National Archives and that's now Library and Archives Canada. Give you one real quick example. One of the researchers there, I used to have a technique back then, is like I'd call and leave a phone mail message when I knew they wouldn't pick up an answer, and then they'd call you back. This is before calling plans and a lot, email. So they would call me back, and one made a suggestion that I should check the annual Strokers report. And a Stroker report, what that is, it's about major radar detections made from the NORAD bases, and they're saying, in fact, the year you're looking for at the time, it was to do with Shag Harbour, 1967. I had it out yesterday. It's just here in the other room. And she went to get it, and she came back and said, "I don't believe this. It's missing. Only two of us have access to that, and it's signed in and signed out. There's going to have to be an investigation. I'll get back to you." She never got back to me, so I let a month go by, and I phoned her up, and I got this person on the phone at D&D, and she says to me in a very monotone voice, "Yes, it was discovered. There was nothing pertinent to what you were looking for."
Of course
She
not.
says that in this absolute.
Wow.
And this person was usually very animated and helpful. And I took this as kind of a nod, wink, wink, Chris, I'm sorry, I've been vetoed.
Yeah.
And I've run into this a few times over the years, and you'll find a helpful staff and they get squashed by somebody up the chain of command.
It happens.
Sure.
Yeah, it happens. That's why it's hard to be friends with the person at the top of chain of command.
Oh,
because
yeah.
they are keeping those secrets.
Last Sunday I did a little talk in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, and I showed some examples of this. And one of the ones that got the best giggle was when I showed how I contacted Foreign Affairs back in the 90s and requested a KGB contact to look up a Russian story I'd found. And they did give me a response of, how to contact the archivist's last agent that
Right.
might help me, which she did. And it was interesting. The interesting part is this. I put in that request. They're supposed to answer within 30 days. And if not, they can ask for a 15-day extension.
Wow.
That request took 50 weeks to get the answer. I pointed
Wow.
it on the letter and I said, look at that. And then when I sent a letter inquiring about that, it says, I'm sorry, but for such requests, we have to do these outside of the act.
Oh, so you didn't just get black pages.
Oh, no. In fact, let me give you another example. I mean, when I had the Space Object Contingency Plan released, and Canadian ufologists, many of us had looked for this for years, and everybody would say, well, you're never going to get that. I finally got them kind of trapped in a corner, and I managed to get them to release that to me. And when the chief archivist called, I remember his name was Sergeant Maurice Laferriere, and once he finally conceded, yes, we have it, I know what you're talking about. He said, I think I can help you. But he says, it'll be outside of the act right away. So before you get too excited, here's the reason, here's the rationale why. And I said, why is that? Well, he said, it's that, again, we'd have to respond within 30 days. We could request a 15-day extension from you. But, that's it. He says, I cannot respond in that time because I need permission, get this, from Ottawa, every provincial capital, and Washington to release information. Well, what it was is, he said the problem is this policy, which, by the way, you know what its second title is? I love this. And he seemed really embarrassed when he read it to me. And when they sent me the actual booklet, it's called The Master Plan. And it's
telling you these titles.
The Master Plan. Yeah, he described that, by the way. Look, Amelia, his word for it was unfortunate.
Nice. Yeah.
I said,
I'm finding these titles hilarious.
Yeah, they think we make these things up, right? But
yeah.
I sent copies to 10 U.S. museums that in the States that wanted it, and people across Canada, researchers. But when this thing was released, for years we heard rumors that when U.S. had rolled into Newfoundland or something and did their own investigation and closed roads, interviewed witnesses, told them not to talk, and that it can't happen. But once this policy was released, it clearly said they had the right to do that we had a working arrangement. And until Canadian Armed Forces shows up on the scene, any bona fide, this is the actual words it uses, U.S. agent from, a legitimate agency like CIA, FBI, whatever.
Anybody from Langley. Yeah.
Will get an RCMP export to an escort to the site they requested and are allowed to do the investigation until Canadian Armed Forces shows up, and then they become the lead agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're certainly allowed to come in and have their way. And many a times, I know skeptical researchers have said to me, well, Chris, they just couldn't roll into Belle Isle, Newfoundland, or they couldn't roll into Shag Harbour and take over. Well, yes, they can. And I found the policy, and it gave you all this great practical stuff. It said how far to keep the crowd downwind if you couldn't control it, who gets to drag away the dead bodies and all this. That's all in there. Who's in charge?
Wow.
It was amazing. Yeah. And I love it. The Master Plan.
The Master Plan.
Yeah.
That would be like Project Yogi Bear for Jellystone Park.
So Chris is asking, is it Washington State or Washington, D.C.?
D.C.
I would think
Washington, D.C.
D.C.
D.C. Yeah. Because what it is, it was our arrangement between the U.S. and us, right?
Yeah.
And think about the title, the first title, not the Master Plan, although I prefer that one.
I love that.
Yeah. When you think about it, the Space Object Contingency Plan, you won't find the word UFO in it, although there is one page that does describe scripts, if UFO people ask, or what you'd say in a radio interview, in the early days before you have the data. So that's kind of neat, how to handle the media. Pretty crude by today's standards. It was written in 1948, by the way.
Wow, that long ago?
Yeah, and this was in place and actually used in the 70s and 80s. I'll give you one example, because forget about UFOs for a minute. I mean, there was a Soviet nuclear spy satellite that crashed in the Canadian high Arctic. There's a book about it called Operation Morning Light. And there was the U.S. helped us in the search to clean up, because when this thing broke up on reentry, there was radioactive debris over a large area, might have been like 600 square miles. And some of the Inuit and local peoples had to be kept away, you know, and it was dangerous. And it took a long time to recover a significant portion of the stuff. And there was a lot of argument in it. Now, they were supposed to go by the rules of this, you know, when the two teams worked together. And the U.S. was very concerned about the press releases coming out by the Canadian staffers and trying to keep it. And, you know, you'll see in that many references to the space object plan and who was in charge, you know, and became a bit of a piss and match like some American cop show, you know. But, you know, that's why this thing was in place, you know, and it could be anything. It would apply whether it was a UFO, a nuclear satellite, something unknown, you know, a disease, whatever, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Like it goes way, way back. And you get all these little tidbits of information. But if you really dig, you'll find it.
Well, it's like the Boy Scouts, be prepared. But it took more than digging. You got to understand, Michelle, because many people, including myself, have tried to get this over the years.
Yeah.
And you know what you always ran into is like, we don't know what you're talking about. But when you'd go to a site, you know, or talk to the Mounties about, you know, a case like, you know, Nova Scotia is not that large. I heard that maybe the Mounties responded to a sighting, say, in Port Hawkesbury or something. I'd go there the next day. I'd go to the local detachment. You'd meet with the officers that had investigated, right? And they would tell you, like, oh, yeah, you know, and when we're in doubt what to do, if we'd actually found something, we'd have to refer to the space object contingency plan. They would mention this thing, and I'd say, well, do you have a copy? Do you? Well, we're not trained in it. We'd call headquarters. They keep a copy in Halifax, and, you know, if it's a bigger issue, we'd go to Ottawa. But that's the rule book for how we interact or what we would do once we find we're dealing with something real on the ground. So many of us in Canada had looked for this thing for years. And when you'd send a request to the archivist, you'd always get, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Do you have a file number? Well, no, you know, and that would be pretty much the end of it.
You just have to do the dance repeatedly.
But see, I was looking for UFO cases, and supposedly they had just transferred them all to National Archives, so they're going to disappear in a hole for 15 years. And the girl that I called, because I always would call up to complain and file a complaint in those days with the information commissioner, she's saying, sorry, Chris, everything was here, and just like we're supposed to, 3 years later, we clean out the files and move them on. When somebody has a UFO case, it stays in the detachment 1 year, and if it's dormant, you know, just like another kind of criminal case, it goes to HQ, it sits there 3 years, then it goes to National Archives. So anyway, she says, everything's cleaned out, except she goes, there's just some old policy document there, the space object plan or something like that. Geez, I jumped off the couch. I said, that's it. That's what I want. And I remember the staff, her name was Corporal Lise Lachance, and she said to me, no, Chris, I have your request in front of me. That's not what you asked for. And I said, yes, it is. I just didn't know what it was called. This is not, I think you know how big a fib that is.
I'm taking him to buy my next car.
So she says, you're going to have to send in a new request, which I did. 2 days later, the chief archivist calls me and says, yes, he says. And I set her up the hall to get the file number, because remember, the file number is everything, right? Yeah. She said, yeah, I had it yesterday. I'll go up. And she brought it back. I could hear her heels clicking in the hallway on the phone. I can remember that holding. She came back. She read me the file number, had to repeat it several times. When the chief archivist called, he said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. That file number makes no sense. I said, I'm sure it's correct. I said, Corporal Lachance can help you. She had it out the other day. And he said, well, I'll check with her. I said, she had it. I said, she read from it to me. That wasn't true either. Oh, she did she? So he ran right off, you know, and 10 minutes later, he calls me back and says, I know what you're talking about. And he realized that was an admission that they had it, right? And that's when he went into the, I can help you, but it has to be outside the act, right? And he explained
Right.
why. He was true to his word. Every month I'd get a phone call from him. Oh yeah, I forgot. See, we made a deal. Here's the deal I made him. I said, okay, I can see where that might take time, and some of the people had retired, and there's newer legislation and all this. And I said, well, look, as long as I get verbal updates at least once a month, I see no reason to complain to the Information Commissioner of Canada. I said, so I think we got an understanding. And he said, yes, yes. And he, true to his word, he called me
Grudgingly.
every month and eventually said, no, I can send you, I have this. And it came with a letter. And unlike National Archives, it came, they paid for all the reproduction cost and the mailing and everything. I've often found over the years, actually, I've had greater success with the originating agencies, dealing with the Navy or RCMP than Foreign Affairs, etc. I
Mhm.
mean, it's pretty good. I thought that's good service when you can call the government and ask for a KGB contact and get it. You got to be patient. Took a year. But you know something, Amelia, all that stuff that got released to me,
Mhm.
here's the thing, and me and Stanton at Friedman and I, God bless him when he was alive, used to talk about this a lot because he'd get stuff, and it's famous, him holding up the sheets,
Yes.
often legal size with black ink that you could read a word or two,
Mm.
right?
No,
I have never gotten anything with anything blacked out.
you've never had a redacted
Never
sheet.
once. I've never had a
Then
redacted.
I feel like then it's just meant that you're the one who's supposed to be taking that. I feel like that's what it is.
Well,
You're the contact, you're the person,
I think part
the
of it is,
messenger.
yeah, it's harder to do now, and it may be impossible in some cases. I think part of it is that I dealt directly wherever possible with the lead agencies, and I tended to do things like, as I described, outside the act because my
Yeah.
requests were a little more unusual. Most people are looking for cases, not policies, right?
Mhm.
But
Yes.
policies can be pretty insightful, I'll tell you.
They are because they're comprised together because of the case. That's
Yeah,
why they're making those
yeah,
policies, and that's a great perspective to attack that, a great
yeah.
methodology,
I,
I sorry.
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, you're a guest.
I was I remember one time looking for a ship's log that they claimed was missing. And the reason they gave me was that it came out of the captain's hands and had washed overboard. This is on the Bonaventure, by the way, our aircraft carrier, former aircraft carrier. I phoned them up, and when I got the person on the phone that had written this, I said, "Am I really supposed to believe this?" I said, "I
Mm.
can actually call Admiral Andy Moore. He was still alive then. Um, uh, just by luck, his son, before he went into specialty and became a cardiologist, there was a GP and was my doctor. I knew where he was, and I said, he'll probably remember. He's pretty, and was quite a famous admiral. That's the
Mhm.
great thing about Nova Scotia and Halifax, the world's biggest small town, right?
Yeah, and great
Everybody knows
people.
everybody, right? Well,
Right.
suddenly
You're
the
wonderful people as well.
well, you know, I don't know, but it's been home.
Hmm.
Feels like home.
Very lucky.
Mm. What are your thoughts on this whole, disclosure thing? You've been getting bits and pieces of it the whole way along. What do
Yeah.
you think of the false flag theory?
In what sense? Like the false flag
Well,
theory?
there's just a lot of fear mongering going on. It's like we were talking a little bit, but we talk about it quite a bit because I have a lot of people who come on and talk about their research. And, this is becoming a worldwide thing, but everything's hinging right now in the United States, of course. And there's a lot of the false flags, instilling fear. Project Blue
Well,
Book, all of this stuff.
yeah.
The war machine has to keep going, therefore there has to be an enemy. I
Well,
suppose
war
the best way to put
war
it.
war is good business. There's been.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a country where a lot is driven by fear. I mean, there's fear and good reason for fear sometimes
Right.
in our world today, but there's always been.
Yes.
I had a laugh recently going back to archives, provincial archives in Halifax. I took a look at the very first newspaper out of Halifax, which was, I think, in 17, I can't remember now, 51 or whatever.
Wow.
And, you know, when I read at the front, and, you know, very odd looking, kind of dry reading. There was no headlines in papers in those days, but when you read it, one of the first pieces of news, and of course it would have been months old by then, was somebody threw a rock and hit the Pope in the head in a parade in Vienna.
Wow.
And as you
That's
went
so
down and
cool.
read about local atrocities and other things, you
Yeah.
realize there was plenty of things to be feared. Then there was a little sort of almost op-ed article about how, you know, making small crossbows and making them to sale to the public could be the end of the world. And, you know, fear has always been a thing. And I think some in the US, you know, you see that's worked. And I don't think it's a new thing. It's just now that it's so, you know, it can be updated so quick. There's just so much of it flowing because of modern communication of the internet and that, right? But fear was always a big motivator, selling thing, distraction, problem, you know.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you have, you know, the world's greatest, or one of the world's greatest superpower, if not the biggest, coming out with this information. You know, people sort of hinge on, okay, where do we all fit in? And are they going to do it this time? And if they do, then they sort of have to admit that maybe they knew about, you know, abductions or contact or things like
Sure,
that.
they did. Just like
Yeah.
they knew about Shelburne, just like
Yes.
you're going to ask me about the Cape Sable
We're
sighting at some
building up to
point.
that. Yes, we are.
Well,
I
Yes, we
just
want
think
to
are.
about
see it in
this.
person.
That happened about 2 miles from a NORAD radar facility that's still there, one of those big
Yes.
domes that automatically feeds down to the US. So whatever happened there, providing it painted at all, they very likely knew about that. And it probably did paint based on information from Lieutenant Graves there and that. And I'll have to piece that together at the time. But, you know,
Right.
yeah,
Are you
you know,
going? Sorry, I was going to say, are you going to also tell us about why this I want to call it an island, but I also want to call it an islet because of how you know, tiny this is, how small it looks, but it moved.
we're talking about the orb
Sable.
over. Yeah.
No,
Uh,
the actual Cape Sable, like the Sable Island, it has moved. I don't think
okay.
people realize that.
Yeah. First of all, we're not talking about Sable Island. We're talking about
Okay.
Cape Sable.
Cape Sable.
Cape
Okay.
Sable.
Sable Island is a crescent. It's a sandbar that's moved over the years. You're right, and it is beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, it's offshore there. It's the closest point to land in Nova Scotia on the mainland is actually Canso, down near the causeway with Cape Breton. Technically, Cape Sable, pardon me, Sable Island is part of Halifax County in Halifax. If you work there, if you're one of the scientists or the few permanent residents like Zoe Lucas, the biologist that's out there, she would cast her vote in Halifax County, right?
Yes.
And you see that during election time, Halifax, Sable Island. It sounds funny, you know, but yeah, no, that's couple hundred kilometers out there. Cape Sable is in southwestern Nova Scotia. It's not far from Shag Harbour. It now has a causeway that goes over to it. It would have formerly been an island. It's I don't know, I would say 10 miles by 6 miles. It's a good chunk of, and that's where the sighting happened. And there's been some confusion about that, but yeah, it was Cape Sable, and that was September the 15th, 2018. And I believe that what we saw, that orb, that you know, it's not the best video.
We'll play clips of it for sure.
Yeah, and I understand because the young guy that took that, Justin Brown, when he first called me, I was in Yarmouth, and we rushed to the scene, and you know, it was I'll never forget it because, you know, if you'd asked me when would you have seen a UFO that you feel for sure was unconventional, I would have said, well, when I was 12, the night of Shag Harbour, but I was in Dartmouth and saw what people saw up here in Metro. But I never thought I'd be that lucky. I've heard so many witnesses here to events in Nova Scotia say that, but here I was, you know, in 2018 in the right place, or close enough that I got there and I caught the last 7 minutes of the sighting, which I insist are the best 7 minutes, because the video excerpts you may show It was at very high altitude then and over a different part of the island. But when I got there, it was first out to sea, and we got to see it much closer. And it also exhibited some features that aren't caught in the video that I think were most telling.
Right. So what I'll do is I'll leave this leave the sound on or off. It's a little animated.
Oh, yeah, I would suggest
So
that. Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
FM, yeah. So I've got to leave it down, but maybe you can, because we have so many audio listeners, you
Yeah.
can, just walk everybody through it, and because it's 10 minutes, we'll play it in
Yeah.
increments and sort of go from there. How does that sound?
Yeah, fine. Fine.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna do
Okay.
that. Okay, right now, here we go. So this is what we're looking at right here.
Yeah, that's before he zooms in.
Right.
The whole time this is happening, he's having a lot of trouble because there he is trying to zoom in and refocus.
Okay.
Yeah.
The challenge was this. The UFO at this point is almost at the zenith of the sky, directly overhead, and he's got a Canon camera, and it's on a tripod.
Oh, here we go
And
again.
yeah, and what he's trying to do is get the tripod to lock on, and it's just too much of an angle, like he can't secure it.
Right.
Now the orb is moving, but very slowly at this point. At some point, there is some stable footage in this. I don't know if those are the excerpts. You would have somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes. I think there's a couple of points where he manages to get it locked on, zoomed in, and see, it was at extreme altitude at this point. Now, it looks odd because, as you know, Michelle, from you haven't been here, how rare is it that you get a Windex blue sky here with no cloud? But that is what that day was like, right? There was no
Right.
haze. Okay, there it is. And if we were able to zoom this in, or like I have a still, I don't know if you have that. Maybe
I don't have your stills. No.
Yeah, you see, like later on, when I was present, this sighting, by the way, went on for an hour and 20 minutes. And
Wow.
yes, yeah, and there was a lot of witnesses. There was I would say at least 60 witnesses on the beach that day. Now, this is
Oh, that's
before
wonderful.
this is before it's over. But if we could see this zoomed in, and we're not going to be able to here, it looks small.
No, you'd have to send me the picture and I
Goes
can
out
put
of
it up.
frame and he does it. Yeah, I can do
Yeah.
that. You can put it up
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
site after or whatever. There's a still.
I could
that I
play it.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the odd features here. Okay, when you look at it, there, it just looks like a round orb, but when it was closer toward the end of the sighting, which we're not going to get in this clip
That-
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we could zoom in, even like when I have this on PowerPoint and I'm doing a talk, you can see.
Yeah, I don't know that I
very
can
dar-
zoom it in on this program.
No, I don't think you're going to be able to. There's a
No.
very dark ring around it, and it's kind of white and it's sort of translucent, the sphere. And a lot of people described, in their memory that, what they saw, they believed was that there was some kind of symbol or insignia on the side, which looked a lot like what they called the peace symbol, right?
Right.
But
Right.
what I realized when I've seen it up close, which there was no video for at that point, all the cameras, everything was dead. When it was closer in the last 7 minutes of the day, I had a good set of Steiner binoculars on. And first of all, the interesting thing about why I say the last 7 minutes of the sighting was most interesting was that at that point it was out to sea offshore. And when I arrived, it took me about an hour from Yarmouth, and people said, well, it's disappeared, it's gone, it might come back. It did it a couple times. Next thing you know, it returned, and I went to the shoreline, and at first it was quite a bit offshore and just looked like a bright silver dot, but it was moving in our direction.
Right.
Eventually it became close enough you could see what people had described. It was white, and what appeared to be a symbol on the side or whatever was in powder blue. But when it got closer still, you realize that this wasn't something on the outside, on the surface, that it was translucent. You were looking into it, and there was a structure inside, almost like the set of beams. And I think I sent you some stills. I built a model afterwards.
Yeah.
And
A second.
when it was closest, and when I got my binoculars on it, right, I could clearly see that it wasn't a peace symbol, but what we were looking at was in fact a cube inside a sphere, very much like the Atlantic sightings that the U.S. carrier pilots, like
Okay.
Captain Graves had described. These are not the Tic Tac sightings, which are with the carrier group out in the Pacific, but these would be similar to the 2014 sightings, right?
Okay, let's see here. It's a sort of
Yeah, and this is a little model.
I don't know
Yeah.
what like the computer's doing here, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. But the
Yeah,
point is, I
okay.
sent you two stills of this little model I used to bring to help explain this,
Right.
because in one of the slides, this shows that it's actually a cube inside. The other
Right.
one is I have taken a picture in the other still from a slightly different angle,
Okay,
and
I'll
you
grab
can
it.
see that when you view it vertices on, it looks like the peace symbol.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
So this is what people were seeing that day when they seen it from a distance. When they first seen
Okay,
it,
I'm
it
gonna
was
play
like
that one.
maybe a mile or two up or whatever, right?
Yeah, I'm going to pull up the other one here for you as well.
Yeah, that's the model. And I don't know why I didn't send you the still, but
Here we go.
yeah, as you see what I mean, how that could be interpreted as the peace symbol,
Right.
because you're looking vertices on at a cube, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now there was yeah,
There we go.
and that was it. It all had to. Now, of course, I'll tell you, making this made the hamster mad. I'll tell you, but he was disappointed.
Where's my wheel?
I went home, and I'll tell you, building this is so funny. Made me feel like the character in Close Encounters. How he was obsessed about building, a model he couldn't understand why of the Devil's Tower, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Here I am trying to build a model to show, once somebody had made the suggestion to me that, there is something inside that's not like a symbol on the side. It's not a peace symbol. It's in fact a cube, and you're looking at it vertices on.
Right.
Well, when I send you the still after, you can, I suppose, post it, use it, or whatever. Just you'll see what I mean, because at that point the UFO is closer and it's much larger, and you can see this is what you're seeing now. The clear plastic here is kind of like translucent. It's kind of like looking at a jellyfish. It's not
Right.
smoothly visible, but you'll be able to see that feature quite clearly when I send you the still that was taken.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
But
I'll put it in the comments when Amelia posts
yeah,
the audio.
but
Yeah, the archive. Yeah.
but anyway, when I was present and on the scene and saw this, when it got close, twice this thing disappeared as it was approaching us and reappeared. And when I say disappeared, it was just like you flipped a switch.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I called it a Windex blue sky, with no haze. Like it wasn't like it ducked behind a cloud,
Right.
it was gone and then it was back. Now, when it was gone, I don't know if it like went stealth or slipped into another dimension or simply accelerated and we couldn't tell. It's just like you flipped a switch, it was there, it was gone. It would come back and it would be closer and still on its same, trajectory toward us, right? But yeah, I do have a still of it, and you'll see. But that model just made it so much easier when you do a talk to get it across. But like I say, I remember building that and thinking like, seems pretty silly, and
Not at all.
yeah. But the point being that I think that this is very similar to what was seen off the carrier group, and of course they described sometimes when the jets would close on, this thing would just boom, it's 60 miles away now or whatever. But the reason I say they probably have evidence of this is the fact that NORAD facility, which is Canada's end of the Pine Tree line,
Right.
everybody knows about the Dew line, but there's a Mid-Canada line and a Pine Tree line, and the end of that is right down near Cape Sable. Just across the way in the water, you can see at Backrow Point, there's a huge automated dome that hooks into the NORAD system.
Mm-hmm.
So if they had radar returns from the spheres inside the cube off the carrier sightings that were in the Atlantic off Virginia, they very likely have one here from this sighting, that hung around for at least an hour and 20 minutes, and I suspect longer,
Mm-hmm.
that day. And I know 3 weeks later, I did a little presentation down in the museum, and I had to do two because so many people showed up to tell us of what they saw that day and their sightings. I'll tell you what was fascinating too was watching the witnesses as this happened. I was intent on it. We were so transfixed, in fact, at one point, a little rogue wave come in. We were standing right down by the water's edge, and we all ended up getting wet feet because we're all looking up.
Right.
Couldn't take our eyes off it. And when it disappeared, but, most people walked by. Most of them never looked up, didn't even see it.
Mhm.
Wow.
Two young girls that were leaving the beach that day. It was the last summery day that day that was hot that you would have went in the water here in Nova Scotia.
Mhm.
And two of them were leaving, and they were looking at us, and they came up to us and said, "What are you guys all looking at?" And one of the other witnesses that was with me in Yarmouth that drove down with me, Heather Doucette, she just points up and goes, "That." And the two young girls look, and they just dropped their stuff and ran to the car.
Oh, they were scared.
Yeah, it was closer at that point. You could see that it wasn't just a dot or it wasn't a weather balloon or whatever.
Mhm.
And, the point being to get that full range of reaction. I can remember Laurie Wicken saying, Laurie is the chairman of the Shag Harbour Incident Society. On my way there, he called me and said, you won't believe what's over Cape Sable right now. I'm watching a UFO. Well, when I got there, we looked at one another, and at the end of the day, when it was all over, Justin Brown was so frazzled because he'd wrestled with his camera and his equipment for so long trying to get better footage, right?
Mm.
And then
Yeah.
when it finally came close, he kept filming when he could. Of course, he didn't know it would come closer. His batteries were dead then, right? When it was really close, nobody could get an image. But Laurie Wickens, he was the original witness that called the RCMP the night of the Shag Harbour incident in '67. And he
Wow.
looked at me and he said, you're here. I'm here. Heather's here, who is an experiencer, repeater, who used to live on Cape Sable, now
Mhm.
Shag Harbour. And Justin Brown, who shot the footage, who, I've traveled with and, to many UFO events and conferences and whatever, who's going to believe this isn't scripted? You know what I mean? It's just, what are the chances?
Yes. Yes. Right.
You're all
But
there. Yeah.
it was so satisfying that day. But the funny thing was when I checked up with everybody a week later, they were all totally wrung out and seriously suffering from some different kinds of what I would call the Oz factor.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. Can you explain that for people who would have
yeah,
absolutely no idea?
it's a term that's often used to describe. Well, I think it's well portrayed in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Time. Not my favorite movie, but it does that part very well.
Mhm.
Where, he's lost his job, he loses his family, and he's obsessed. And all he can focus on, the only things that exist for him, is the phenomena in
Mhm.
itself, and trying to
Right.
make some sense of it. And this is
Right.
what happens, and it can take different forms. They cannot handle normal family life. They can't work. They can't. This is a common reaction. Some people just would start getting headaches and would withdraw.
Mm.
Others become obsessed about the phenomena, but normal behavior gets changed, right? Now,
Right.
sometimes it'll last a few days and they'll snap back. Sometimes it can be long term and debilitating. Yeah.
Mm.
The funniest thing about this is a month before this, or something like 6 weeks, I'd have to check. I was shooting a documentary there with Fabian and Celine Cousteau, Jacques
Yes.
Cousteau's
Yes.
grandchildren, in
Yes.
that area. One day when I wasn't filming, I got a call from a person asking if I could meet them to tell me my story. And they took me to the very spot we were that day and told me that they were attacked by one of these and paralyzed. and described it. And she just wanted to know who she could talk to from the
Wow.
perspective of seeking therapy and how to move on, because she was unable to work. She was seriously affected, this girl. And at
Wow.
the time, I never said anything. I never told Justin Brown or anybody else
Attack. Yeah,
about
that's
it.
pretty strong
But
words. Like
well,
wording.
it paralyzed her. You know, there was no
Right.
beings or interaction to
Yeah.
come down. She couldn't move. She tried to escape the scene, heard
Right.
whispers in her ears,
Oh, that's terrible.
lost the sense of time, and suddenly she regained it and ran away, left her stuff on the beach,
Yeah.
jumped the car, never came back, left the town eventually, you know. But when she showed me the spot, it was the exact spot we ended up standing in that day. And none of the others with me knew that. And I'm sitting there, and when this thing, I can remember Heather Doucette, one of the witnesses, looking up with me, standing beside me, saying, "Well, if this thing gets any closer, we'll have all the answers." And I remember none of them knew what I knew about it, and I'm thinking, I hope there's safety in numbers, though. You know,
Because there was quite a few of you there
yes,
to
there was.
witness that, which is good.
Yeah, she was there, and see, she was out that day just enjoying sun at the beach, and it was coming toward 4:30. People were going home. It's not the most public or used beach down there, although it can be on a hot day like it was that day. But you know, it got to the point where she was the only one left, and she just kept getting this feeling that, you know, she was being watched, and she'd sit up, look around the beach, look up and down, and saw nothing, but just kept having this uneasy feeling, right? And then she thought, well, I might as well go. It's time to go, and sat up. And she just happened to stretch and look up, like tilted her head back, and saw this thing above her coming down toward her. And she just think, oh, Jesus, you know, and got up and tried to leave the area and fell face first in the sand and couldn't move.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
Yeah, those kind of things scare me.
yeah. Oh, and it was, I mean, her story was, I can picture her standing there the day she took me. There was actually a light mist and rain on the beach and fog that day, and I wasn't shooting on the documentary. And you know, when she's telling me the story, you know, she was shaking and shredding Kleenex in her hand. And, you know, she told me she can't work anymore, you know, had moved to the community after a bad marriage in Halifax.
So it's like PTSD, like she's
Yeah, yes, very
traumatized.
much. Yeah, think of it as
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Like I say, for some people, it can be temporary, but those are all different sort of aspects of how the Oz factor might manifest. But basically, the commonality between how they manifest is suddenly your world shrinks to you and the phenomena, and trying to make sense of it. And again, that is well portrayed, I think, even in a movie that fails in other ways, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You know, you see what happens as we're trying to make sense of these
Right.
impressions. Yeah,
I've never seen that film.
it's worth watching.
Yes, I've caught bits of it.
Yeah.
I've caught bits of it. My
Yeah.
brothers were big fans. I was really young when it came out too. My brothers were big.
There's a
Well,
few
they still are
excessive-
big sci-fi fans.
Yeah, there's a few things Mr. Spielberg could have left out that would have made it much better. I have trouble with the scene with the screws unscrewing themselves out of the
Right.
heat registers, and that they would have just anyway.
Right.
Probably
no.
put it there for fear, just for a little bit of, you know, trepidation. When you're watching that, you want that little bit of adrenaline going through your audience. It's dramatic effect, right?
Well, it was probably a homage to, you know, his heroes in filmmaking, you know, from Truffaut to Hitchcock, etc., you know. But I mean, overall, you know, it does do certain things well. It has a point, you know, and it does show the Oz factor well. I mean, there's other scenes in it that are lifted right out of reality, like the scene in the air traffic control center at Indianapolis, and that, you know, it's worth watch if you haven't seen it, Amelia, you know.
Right.
I will watch it before we talk to you
But you-
again, I promise.
But you know,
We're
if
gonna
you're
write
interested
that
in the
down.
phenomena, the thing I recommend even more is that old I think it was 55 movie, Unidentified Flying Objects, the motion picture. You'll
Right.
find it. Try to find. There's probably 3 or 4 versions. Try to find a better copy of it on YouTube.
Okay.
Right.
But I mean, you'll be amazed what's in that. And you know, the contactee movement is kind of out there, but by the end, when they show some of the best film footage shot, and you got to remember, this is film footage. shot in a day when you could do nothing with it in the dark room, right?
That's amazing,
The
isn't it?
sun
I
is
miss
set on
film.
this. This is from a time when a picture was worth 1,000 words, and they got some good evidence, particularly on the the sightings, like which they show in slow motion, zoom in, back and forth at the end. It's worth watching. And I know that there were researchers like Kevin Randall was one of them, that he'd say every now and then over the every 10 years or so he watches that to recharge his batteries. And I'd recommend it to anybody. I could remember, Elliot Van Dusen
Yes.
from the
Yeah. He's a
PPRI.
great guy.
He
Yeah.
came down years ago to Shag Harbour when we were doing a conference down there, and took the actually it was in Dartmouth, and we took a bus tour to Shag Harbour. And he was on the bus, and while we were going down on the bus, I had a pristine copy of that movie, and we showed it on the bus. There were monitors all through. And the
Oh,
reaction
wow.
we got, I remember he was stunned. He'd never heard of it. And many people, even hardcore researchers, hadn't. And they go, "What the hell was that? Where did you get that?" It's around a few places now, and it had been shown on a couple of networks, but for a long time, it just seemed to slip into the dustbin of history. But
It's time for it to come back.
it
We
it
need to
it,
have
it,
it online.
it takes you back to a simpler time. But
Yeah.
you know,
Nostalgic
watch
UFOs.
it, watch it, watch it.
Nostalgic UFOs.
Well, we were simpler too. You need two things
Yes.
for a UFO sighting. You need a UFO and you need a witness. And what you
Right.
realize when you see this is the possibilities and how people saw what was happening, and the fact it was much easier to discern what was real and what wasn't.
I miss real film footage. I really miss that in today's society, because you don't know what's real anymore.
Well, the sun is set on that. We can't turn back time.
No.
But you can go back in time and look at it when you see this film, how it was.
What was it called again?
Unidentified flying objects, spelt out like the words, the motion picture.
Okay, I will definitely look for it.
And you'll see some of the actual witnesses and the actual film footage of early events, and it's it'll give you a feeling by the time it's over, right? There's some funny things in it, there's some tackiness in it, but you'll see some insight before everything was preconceived and everybody had their minds made up. It's worth a look. I mean, I know more than one researcher. I named Kevin, I know, was one of them. I'm another. But I've had others that, like, say, every few years when they feel burnt out or they've lost their focus, they go back and watch that old movie.
I understand that.
I grew up watching Project UFO.
Yeah, I understand
one.
that feeling. Yeah.
But I think there's always that one show that will resonate with you. For me, that was back in probably the 70s, 80s. And that was the show. And I would spend hours looking up at the stars, but I was also an experiencer. And wasn't really aware of it. Really, So but that it made sense to me. It resonated with me.
What was that show called?
It's called Project UFO. It was a TV series.
I wonder if it's on YouTube.
I don't know.
You never know. Somebody who really, a lot of people will hold on to those. So it's worth it if people are interested.
I somehow I missed that one too.
Project UFO. Yeah.
I didn't see it either.
I take it was a U.S. production.
Must have been, because I grew up northern Ontario.
Yeah. What year? What
that
years
was it.
would that have been? What years would that have run?
Boy, that's a Wayback Machine. Well,
it's on YouTube. Dolly said it's on YouTube.
There we go.
There you go.
I think 70s. It was in the 70s. I was
in the 70s. Yes.
Yeah, probably. Late 70s, mid to late 70s, maybe even infringing into early 80s.
Chris was busy out there investigating. That's why he missed it.
No, I wasn't. No, I didn't start investigating until April 1992.
No, I'm trying to give you a reason.
Let me just see. I'm going to go.
I was trying to have your back here.
Project UFO.
Yeah, Dolly said it's definitely on YouTube.
Let me just look and see. Yeah.
It's interesting because,
1978 to 1979.
I wouldn't have seen that because I was 8.
So there it is.
I was 8.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wouldn't have seen that.
there it is. Yeah, so you can definitely find it. It's just so it played for a year. Yeah,
It's you know, even some of the fictional movies back then are great. I like the ones that aren't well known, of course, that you run into. Like one
right.
of my favorite ones is the bamboo saucer.
The bamboo saucer.
Well, yeah, it's more
No.
watchable than you think. And you know, if you want to see a really good movie about secrecy in the Air Force and the hand of government, and it's really kind of creepy. It's a short movie made with a great Canadian actor in it, Glenn Ford, and I think it's what the disappearance of Flight 412 or whatever.
That one
Oh,
sounds familiar.
plane disappearances freak me right out.
Well, and it's got to do with a UFO in this case, but
Yeah.
the
Right,
whole
I remember
movie,
that.
like after you see the UFO and the incident and the plane and that, um,
Do you think
what
Malaysia could have had some kind of
oh,
UFO?
I don't like to speculate about that.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a
see
tough
the
one. It's
need for that.
very
That's
fresh.
very hard for yeah, that's kind of
It's
Very
fresh
fresh.
for the
haunted.
yeah.
It's haunted me since. I don't feel like it's something like that. I
Well,
feel like it's something else, but it's haunted me since it
I'll
happened.
yeah, I'll tell
That's
you,
all I
I
said now.
think there's a good lesson about why to be careful for that. Are you familiar with the Stendek case? Stendec.
No.
There's a
No.
great documentary that came out about this too. But there was a UFO case, I can't remember now, it was 48 or 49. There was an old prop driven airliner that was supposed to fly from, I think it was Buenos Aires to Santiago, Chile.
Mhm.
hmm
And, you know, back in the day, I could be wrong, but the idea is it was in South America and it was, I'm pretty sure it was in Brazil and it was flying. And
It's
so
a
it would have
short
had
flight.
to go over the Andes and it encountered a lot of cloud and weather, right?
hmm
And they're flying and, you know, there was radio communication, but in those days, particularly at a distance, they were using Morse code. You know, it wasn't voice
Right.
communication, right? And there
Mhm.
was some trouble. They were flying a long time, and there was some uncertainty about their location, and then contact was lost. But the last message received for sure from the airliner to air traffic control in Santiago said Stendek twice.
Hmm.
And they searched and searched and searched. Nothing was ever found. Well, 50 years later, somebody going through the mountains, some mountaineer, found wreckage of a plane and other things coming out of a melting glacier.
Hmm.
And but it was in a very difficult location. And eventually, you know, there was enough pictures taken and sent back and credibility to it. You know, an investigation was put together, and you know, a team of army guys and mountaineers and that went up to investigate to the site. It was very hard to get to. They had to bring most of the supplies and equipment in with burros. And, you know, some of them were falling to their death, like you see. Oh my God, it was a quite a trek to get there. And when they
Yeah.
get there, what they find is, you know, the airliner is melting out what was left of it, the wreckage, right? And of course, you know, the human remains too, out of a melting glacier up on this mountainside. And they're trying to piece together the case. And it was a very detailed, good documentary about the Stendek case. But
Mhm.
here's the warning. Stendek became a name even of a UFO magazine in South America for years. And people, the stories kept circulating that, you know, perhaps the disappearance, since nothing was ever found, had to do with, you know, extraterrestrials and UFO, right? So 50 years later, this wreckage coming out, so they go up. Before very long, they find enough evidence to conclude this was the plane that was missing, right? And
Mhm.
find the remains. What they learn on site from the way the props on the old engines were bent back was that this thing would have hit the mountain at full speed.
Oh,
So now
wow.
they had to figure out why. Um, what they found out, and here's the thing, get this. I can't remember, it was like 47, 48, 49, something like just after the war anyway, right? Believe it or not, um, in the Americas, we didn't know about the jet stream back then. The Japanese did, which is how they got Fugo balloons
Right.
to make it across the Pacific in time, and that, right? We didn't have a true working knowledge of how the jet stream.
Yeah. Aerial
Mm.
riptides. Yeah.
So what happened is this plane was flying and it got up into the jet stream to try to clear the mountains, but they weren't where they thought they were because they've been fighting the jet stream and they had no visibility.
Mm-hmm.
By all accounts, normally they would have been over the mountain and cleared before when they started descending, but they were far, far short of the mountain, you see. And that was it. So they just went in full speed, right? But it
Wow.
was so interesting because parts of the plane they were pulling out, melting out of the glacier, like the tires on it were still inflated.
Hmm.
You know, 50-some years
That's
later.
strange
And
because ice
there
deflates.
were lots of strange things,
Yeah,
on this
because
flight.
ice deflates tires. I
But
know people who live in Edmonton, their tires pop because it's
Yeah.
so cold. They dry out.
Well, if you get to see it, I don't know who produced this. It came out, it might have been, I would guess 12, 15 years ago. But it's an amazing case. But like I say, for decades, there was it was a big case in South America. It was the title of the
Stand-up.
monthly UFO Stendek.
Look
Yeah.
at all these things I have to watch.
And
Okay.
at the end of the documentary, the only real mystery that remains is what did Stendek mean? We don't know, but I thought it might have meant standby.
Right.
If you understand Morse code, it's a very close easy error to make.
Right.
They were getting a weak signal before the plane hit as it neared the mountain, and the guy listening to the dots and dashes, right, may have interpreted Stendek, but it might have been standby.
Mhm.
Wait for him to just take another reading or
Right.
something, and then whammo, it was
Which
all
would make
over, right?
which would make sense.
But anyway, I think there's a cautionary tale before you assign UFOs to.
Mhm.
No, it was just
Yeah.
I should have bit my tongue. It's just came right out as I was thinking it.
Yeah.
I don't think it is that.
No,
Even
but
what I think it is would get me in
Yeah.
trouble on YouTube.
but no, yeah, but what I'm saying is you got to be cautious whatever you
Yeah.
suggest. It's fresh and in respect to the survivors and that, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
I've been haunted. There's something
Yeah.
about that crash, that missing plane
Well, I
that
think what's
it's
hard
just
is
haunted me for
yeah,
years.
it's hard for us to accept that technology has shed no light, right? I mean, technology in a way is the new God, and the fact a lot of people are shocked that there were large parts of the earth, such as the Indian Ocean and other areas, right,
Mhm.
where there's very little coverage as to what's going on.
Mhm.
You think about it, whether a missile comes in or a meteorite over North America, well, look, my personal knowledge and many others, you can look it up. It's not just my knowledge, but
Mhm.
when you look at all the radar coverage and over North America, I stand out of the evening at sunset and see just how much air traffic goes over Nova Scotia at high altitude. Oh
Mhm.
my God, you look at the vapor trails before they go across the pond. Much of it flies across Nova Scotia that comes out of JFK,
Mm.
right? Before it vectors over.
Which is interesting about your sighting at Cape Sable Island, because if it was there that long and
Yeah.
all of this air traffic, sorry, it just popped in my head as you're saying it, all this air traffic
Yeah,
going over
but
there. Like, didn't anybody up there see anything? Did any reports come in from?
well, not that I know of. They might
Oh.
have. I mean, there were certainly reports. You look at, like,
It was
say, if
over
you
an
go back
hour.
to Shag Harbour,
Right.
Pan Am 160, that night, things were seen, right? But like if you're up 7 miles up, and let's say this thing was only a mile up, you're looking down
Right.
from up there, it'll just look almost like it was on the surface or very near it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
You have to be very careful drawing those conclusions,
No,
Yes, yes.
I want to just
Yeah.
apologize to anyone who's listening. My heart goes out to you if you have family members that were on that plane, and I pray and hope that you find answers to that.
Yeah. But I think part of it certainly, and what's a shock to us and what's hard to accept is that, once it broke off its flight path, it went into a part of the earth where there was little coverage. There's not a lot of radar. There's not a lot of whatever.
No,
Right.
there was a lot of lack of communication. I think
Yeah.
everybody would agree with
Yeah.
that.
And you ran with assumptions. And I mean, and look, I could tell you about other airline cases like that. I mean, there's a famous one here in Canada, and the first thing that often happens is, people would say, particularly when it's a veteran pilot, well, he couldn't make a mistake or whatever, but it happens, particularly if they're getting bad data, you know what I mean, from equipment or whatever. I
Mhm.
mean, no, it's like these mysteries in the ocean. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
yeah.
Yes.
One of the things that I bring up sometimes when people say, well, planes disappear and ships disappear, I go, yeah, how come trains don't?
Yeah.
How come trains
But
don't?
do we know for sure? Does everybody report that though?
There is there are
Well,
stories of ghost trains, so we know that, but
No,
yeah.
because there's so many trains in Europe and Scandinavia. There's so many trains we don't know about. They're just circling mountains. They might not have large, passenger
yeah,
capacity.
but when people don't arrive at their destination or the cruise,
There's reports.
but
Yeah, but if
Yeah.
it's a small capacity train where maybe you have like 50, 60
yeah.
people, you wouldn't hear about that internationally. I think that's
No,
something you got to ask when you're there, kind of
no,
thing.
I have an open mind.
Yeah.
Things can disappear, but I mean, look, when I look at the efforts of how hard, somebody has searched for things that have been lost at sea,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and how difficult it is, what a supreme effort it can take sometime, and how
Well,
easily it is to get disoriented.
The sea
yeah.
is it's so vast, so deep. Like we spend so much money trying to discover what's up there, what's in
Yeah,
space, but what about what's in our oceans?
Well,
That's phenomenal.
Sable Island actually, when this big ice mass melted, it resurrected 8 ships
Yeah, I
yeah.
know.
on the
Well,
island. I watched that
well,
today and I was like, oh my gosh.
well, the highest point of land on, and now I am talking about Sable Island when you're
Yeah.
out there, right? On Sable Island, they used to call it Mount Skidmore, but it was named after, underneath it, it was just the sand dunes built up and somewhat hardened, and marram grass that held it in place over a ship called the Skidmore,
Wow.
that had,
I've heard
I
of that
mean,
ship. Yeah.
it's the graveyard of the Atlantic, and that was the highest point of land on the island. Is built around that. But that whole island is moving in an easterly direction, over time. It's just
Hmm.
a big sandbar, right?
It's
And
beautiful and it's filled
it's
with
absolutely
horses.
beautiful.
Yeah,
It's
and
amazing.
the
Yeah.
seals have their pups there. They come together. I watched all of that today. I'm like, I want to go.
Yeah. I was watching seals today across the street.
Were you? Oh,
Yeah,
I keep rubbing it in.
I haven't. No, we don't get a lot here in Halifax Harbor there, but there was I was actually up the road, not just well, I was still across the street, but up the road a ways. And there was a seal, a couple of seals there, and I was watching to see if I saw a shark fin or something, which I did not. But there was this bird that was trying to catch, it looked like some kind of a snake that had somehow gotten in the water, this duck. And he wasn't paying any attention to the seal, and the seal was edging closer, and nature took its course. I was like, oh God. Yeah,
Aha, boy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just
All right.
today. Yeah,
Yeah, because in the winter they come up
Mm.
and they have their
yeah,
pups.
Yes.
It's amazing. They're really cute too.
yeah.
With that being said, we have to do a station, a sponsor ID, and while we're doing that, I'm going to put up some symposium pictures. So go ahead, Amelia.
Okay. Yeah, I've got you.
All
You are
right.
listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 105.3 and 107.7 FM radio. And we are currently streaming live and archived on the Roku channel. So if you're watching us there for the first time, thank you. And please share us up with your friends. Our guest tonight is a dear friend of ours, and he's a very special guest, Chris Styles. He's here tonight all the way from Nova Scotia, Canada, and we are discussing Cape Sable Island UFO incident, the sighting. Lots of witnesses. And if you missed that, don't worry about it. If you're just tuning in, you can stream our archives on any platform that you normally use. Remember to click like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Don't forget to share us with your friends and family. And don't forget to hit like.
Here we go.
To the wonderful people at Folgers Coffee for your continued support, sponsoring our show. We deeply appreciate and we thank you. We love you so much. Without you, we would not be here today. Our fabulous banner and all our promo media that you see is courtesy of horror illustrator, amazing artist Steve McGinnis. He creates commission pieces as well and can be found on Facebook and Instagram. If you're loving our intro and our outro, we have to thank Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, excuse me, for lending his voice. He's Justin Snickers Award winning composer, vocalist, and musician. I'll get it right. It's Friday Eve. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp, stream on any platform. You can also find Dr. Snick on Facebook and Instagram, where he's dropping clips of his music all the time, so you can listen to that before you commit. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. And if you're watching us on Facebook, please give us a like and share us up.
And for all of our audio listeners, you have over 200 different platforms to find us on.
Yes, I missed that whole line.
Yeah, of course, SoundCloud is our biggest, and Google Podcasts and Apple, all your favorites. So check us out there. Subscribe to the United Public Radio Network, and you get to see all of our stuff. So thank you in advance for that. So now we're back, and we've got another 20 minutes to bang some stuff around. So out of everybody who experienced this sighting at Cape Sable, what was the overall feeling of that? Because you have such a mix of people. You always have your naysayers, but because something sits out there for that long, usually people see a UFO on average and it's gone. But for something to sit there that long and transform, I feel it would have made a believer out of non-believers pretty easily. But what was your sense of that, according to Justin, who took the video?
Well, Justin, by the time it was over, he was exhausted.
Right.
Just, of course, he was trying to get, better footage, trying to get the shot. The videographer and him took over, and
Yes.
What do you do? And of course, that's the time things let you down. The equipment of that, that was his perspective on it. But but
you were there as well.
There's and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. But one of the things I enjoyed was watching Justin and Heather Doucette and Lori and these people I knew so well as the effect was happening as the event was happening itself.
Right.
And the hold it had, and it was, that was fascinating, to see the interaction and how they were drawn to it, at one point while we were watching the UFO in that 7 minutes that I was there at the end, Heather Doucette, for example, at one point I was concerned about her. She was starting to laugh hysterically and seemed kind of almost faint and disoriented. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, I think so." But for her, she said, "I see these things all the time, but I never see them in the daytime with all kinds of people around and friends with me, And for her, it represented validation. You know what I mean? That
Yes.
the experience. And what I found was that for everybody there, it had a very deep meaning that way. You know what I mean? But for one, it might be validation. For another, it was, calming and whatever. For the others, it was fearful. And you'd see the nervous habits, but it all had some sort of impact, some lasting impression, right? But let me give you a completely, East Coast perspective on this in a way, because that community, these kind of sightings are common enough. They're not every day, right? But if you're a resident there, and largely, fishermen, they work outside, they work outdoors, right? One of the reasons I was in the area was a fisherman in Yarmouth was coming to show me footage he'd shot of a UFO while he was out fishing, right? That he shot with the phone. That was one of the reasons for being there when this event happened. But I know I did a survey, a door-to-door clipboard survey on the on Cape Sable Island, and what I found was, you knock on a door. Now, you probably wouldn't get this most places in the world, and somebody'd answer. I'd say, "Hello, I'm Chris Styles." I said, "I'm doing a survey. I'm just wondering if you've had any UFO sightings over the years.
Yeah, it's a bit out there.
I'm an independent researcher, and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to survey the neighborhood. Maybe you have, maybe you didn't." And a woman had a baby in her arms, and she's like, "Oh, don't come at me with that." She says, "I'm tired of hearing about the UFOs and all that stuff. I don't know anything about that." She says, "All I know is that when the orange balls are down on the beach, you don't go near them. I tell the kids to stay away from them." And she closed the
All
door.
right.
And she closed the door.
Wow.
And that
Wow.
reaction wasn't every door or anything, or every other door, but it wasn't unique to many people. Like, they
Yeah.
live with them at some point on the island. That's it. And people would tell me, "Well, you tell the kids to stay away from them." But of course, they're always curious, because you can't tell them what they are. Who the hell knows? This is the way the locals look at it, right? But
That's just a part of life.
it's a part of life.
Right.
They share that island with this, you see?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny because we have a friend who lives in Nova Scotia. Only been there about 3-4 years, and he says he feels driven because he lives near the ocean. He goes, "I just feel the urge sometimes. I want to go out there, and I just lay around in the backyard facing, like the water, and I feel compelled to go out there and to just wait." And he
Yeah.
watches the sky. I think it just somehow there's just something maybe about the energy there.
Like, you're on the edge of the world. You're on the edge of this
Yeah,
continent. There's something about the area for sure.
there is, because he feels compelled to do this, and he's completely, this isn't something he ever used to talk about before. He and his family, is with his wife and his
Yeah.
child, and now it's just like it just sees
Yeah.
things moving across the sky, and this is just something that he's embraced and he looks for.
Well, it's common, and I think there's a lot of reasons. Now, depending on where you're at in this province,
Hmm.
like, one of the things people ask me too is, when I read your books about cases that stand out, or people that have done their own research, they'll often ask me, "How come so many cases happen in October?" Well, probably because it's one of the months where most of the time we have clear skies. There's a lot of fog here. There's a lot
Right.
of overcast. So when you got a dense fog bank, or you in a low overcast sky, unless this thing is within 15, 20 feet of you, you might not see it, right?
Right. Right.
But it's the time of year when you have clear skies. It's like, how many sightings are you going to get in downtown Toronto, walking between the tall buildings, looking
You
for
can't
a
even
spot?
see you can't even see the clouds
You
in
don't know
downtown.
what's up. You don't know what's up there exactly,
No.
right? So there are those practical reasons, but I think, yes, part of being here, it spurns curiosity, just looking out, because you're looking out and realizing there ain't going to be a land again till I go around the curve of the earth, and you're looking up, and you get all the mystery of the night sky if you got the clear sky, right? So
Yes.
between
Yes.
the ocean and the sky, you're going to sit
Yes.
there and look, and you have to appreciate it,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
you don't tire
Absolutely.
of it. I know
No.
when I'm away and I don't smell the salt air, something's wrong. You know what I
I,
mean?
you do, yeah, and you have an appreciation. I mean, growing up north, growing up around the Northern Lights, and just growing up around clear skies and crisp, fresh air,
Hmm.
and I mean, I grew up seeing things flying across the sky. This was long before.
Yeah.
I'm kind of aging myself a bit, but this is, long before like a gazillion satellites being up in the sky.
Mm,
Because you'd see many, like if there were
yeah.
satellites, but it was just like every now and then you'd
Well,
see
there's,
something fly out. I watched a craft
yeah.
come down, like literally in the valley I grew up in. I just watched. I spent half an hour watching that thing come down behind the mountains and then just
Hmm.
shoot back up.
Yeah.
And next morning there were military helicopters all over the valley.
Hmm.
It's just like, but this is just something that's like, oh well, there's another one, or there's one. You
Hmm.
just find yourself, you just know, you look at it. I've never felt uneasy about it. I'd
You don't
probably
know
be
any
more
different.
uneasy as an adult than I did
Yeah.
as a teenager or young
Was
adult growing up there. But
as a
now
young
I don't live in I don't see that night sky. You're lucky to see the stars when you live in the city.
well, especially where we live too. There's so many big trucks. But for you as a young child, you didn't know the difference. It was normal
Mm,
for you
yeah.
to have these sightings.
So, and I'm thinking that's pretty similar with the people out in your area, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, one of the early memories I have of the night sky is going out because I'd heard it on the news at 8 or 9, and looking up to watch Echo 2 pass over. Echo
Okay.
2 was a satellite. It was just a giant silvery mylar balloon. And
Right.
it was used in one of the early attempts to bounce microwave signals off of so we could see live TV and watch somebody do bobsledding in Europe live or something, right?
That's
And it
awesome.
was a crude way of making it work. But
Right.
because this thing was like 700 or whatever feet across,
Mhm.
it showed up really well, looked better than the ISS when it passes over,
Right.
and you could
Right.
look up and go, oh, there's Echo 2, you know.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I was fascinated from an age, and I think some are and some aren't.
Mm.
Um, but people in my age range, we remember when you look up, and you could be pretty sure that if you seen something, there was a good chance it was something mysterious. That's one of the
Yes.
great things about the Shelburne case. With the
Mm.
new book, you think
Yes.
about it. 1960, October 1960. It's a world of difference from 67 in Shag Harbour. Couldn't be more different. Why? No manned space mission yet. That was 7 months in the future with Yuri Gagarin from the Soviet Union.
Wow.
Only like 3 things in orbit: Sputnik 1, Sputnik 2, and Explorer 1.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of influence.
That's what I mean. So chances are, when you look to the night sky,
Yeah,
and
there
that
wasn't a lot
time,
to see. So when you saw
yes,
something, you didn't
yes,
turn away.
right,
You watched it to
exactly.
the end till it went over
So
the horizon or disappeared or fell behind the tree line or
Yes,
whatever,
yes,
or
yes,
made you run
exactly.
away.
Exactly. I think it's a
Yeah.
great way to grow up. And now with technology, is it something that, I, 'cause I mean,
Well,
I've done it with my adult children. I mean, I've gone to my mother or my family members and said, "Hey, you guys ever had an experiences?" My father used to talk very avidly about it. My
mhm,
grandfather, yeah, we just sit there and watch. My grandfather had a telescope and
yeah,
watched. Mother, have you had any experiences other than just seeing one? She goes, yes, I think so. Why am I only hearing about this now? Oh,
yeah.
do you know we had a meteor just drop down at 5 o'clock in the morning and went down into the lake?
Well,
What?
yeah.
Why am
mhm.
I only hearing about this now as an adult? See,
But
so they don't talk.
you don't even need a telescope to really make somebody appreciate the sky and think. One
Yes,
night I did a little presentation years ago, and I always remember the reaction.
yes.
And some teacher, I'd done a talk at a nearby library, um, wanted me to do a presentation for the kids, and they were quite young, and I had to talk to her first to be sure. I wasn't going to say anything that was too scary or left a
Right.
negative impression. Just to make it age appropriate, which I did, right? And she liked it so much. She said, "The end of the school year, we're going to have like." We're going to watch the sky at night, and the parents are coming. They're going to, chaperones are going to stay up late. Wondered if you might want to come and talk to the kids outside and point out a couple things in the sky. Well, first of all, I reminded them that I'm not an astronomer, and she said, "Oh, I'm sure you'll be able to explain a few. You keep it simple." I said, "Well, I'd love to."
Mm.
So I had a set of binoculars with me, and we had maybe a dozen so kids gathered around. And when it finally got dark, Jupiter was up and very large and bright in the sky, right?
Hmm.
And I said, if you focus the binoculars for your eyes and you look at Jupiter, that's that bright, bright star there, but it's actually a planet, right? The
Hmm.
largest planet in our solar system. And they would look at it. I said, when you look really close, you'll see 4 little dots of light right close to it. That's the large moons of Jupiter,
Hmm.
the Galilean moons, right? Io,
Hmm.
Callisto,
Yep.
Europa, right?
4 months. Yep.
I said, you see those 4 moons? I said, you might only see 3. One might be in behind the planet, but you see them. And they're going, yeah, they're just like little points of light. I said, but one looks brighter than the other. And they're like, yeah, that one up there in the upper right, it's brighter than the rest. I said, that's brighter than the rest because it's all white and covered with ice. And we believe that there might be life under the ice there in the salt ocean. So you
Wow.
can see that from here. And
Mm.
in your lifetime, we'll know that answer for sure. Well, these kids were so fascinated by that and wanting to pass the binoculars around, right?
That's great.
That's all it took was to give that bit of knowledge, right?
Mhm.
The guidance to
Yeah. So
have
then
that
they asked me,
curiosity.
well, Chris, do you think there are aliens, and do you think they've been here?
Yes, but it's good when they
Well,
ask you.
Yeah, that's right, and well, let me tell you now, you can picture how that went, but it was such a pleasure to do that night and watch that honest curiosity, because
Mhm.
anything this field needs fresh blood, and it
Right.
needs that curious mind to continue. And the
Right.
fact that you don't need to wait until you have your degree or have access to a huge telescope,
Right. Right.
I can remember another time, one of the other things that impressed me was that, um, I was talking about Shag Harbour to a junior high class. It was grade 9. And when I first walked in, and the guy introduced me, they're all kind of slumped in their seats, and you realize what the Bare Naked Ladies meant when they wrote that song, "This is me in grade 9, baby."
Right.
They're very cynical. They're tough. They're getting ready for high school. They're
Mm.
getting that shell on. They're ready for the world.
Right.
And they were sat there, and I thought, oh God, tough audience here, right? And I
Right.
talked for an hour and showed some video had some clips from the documentaries. Well, at the end, they're all sitting up and they're clapping and they're right into it, right? So I said, well, we got some time for some questions and answers. I said, so who's first? And every one of them put their hand up in a flash. And there was a girl sitting in the very front of the row right near me. And she was just a little quicker. I said, I think you beat everybody else. I said, what's your question? And I've never forgotten this. She looked at me and said, because no adult ever asked this or raised this issue. She said, Chris, did you sleep that night?
Wow.
And what it was is in the documentary, it was a clip from Canada's Roswell I did, for the US History Channel. And there's a
Right.
clip in it, and it shows me at 12 running away from when I'm close to the globe there that same night at
Yeah.
Shag Harbour here in Dartmouth.
Right.
And, she was, but what they'd all honed in on and what impressed them is like, I'm 12, but I did what I did. I disobeyed the parents. I ran out of the water line. I had to be close. I wouldn't answer a question. I didn't want to miss it, right?
Right.
Then I came back and I wrote a letter to a base commander and all this as a 12-year-old, right?
Yes.
And they were all like, man, you did that and you were 12. What did your parents say? What happened the next day? You were in trouble. And well, yes, I was,
Yes.
But but the very first thing when I said, first question, I thought it was going to be some technical question or what did the Army do then? Or, what did the Mounties do? Did they hide it or something? She goes, Chris, did you sleep that night?
Mm.
And they were in that age range. And it just never left me that that's how they seen it. And I think that's part of it. You have to, and I think there's a place, my point being, for all of us in this phenomena, whether
Yes.
you're 12 or whether you're 68 or 80. And you
Right.
don't have to be a scientist, although we need them too. It's
Right.
like I say, when I'm doing an investigation, if I need a scientist, I call one. And the amazing
Right.
thing is they always want to help.
Right.
Groups like MUFON have been great and many others and a
Right.
lot of individuals, right? But
Mhm.
you realize that it's a universal phenomena and, it grabs most people. Now, there's still
Yes.
a few of us out there that are dead from the neck up and they go, oh, you're not talking about that. Let's talk about the stock market. Well,
No.
I can't help those people, right?
Right.
Ugh,
Right.
I
But
don't understand it.
yeah,
Right.
there are some things that are bigger than us. There are some things that when we get more answers, they will define and say so much about us
Mhm.
and about everything,
Right.
But but there's an angle to grab the interest and the insight of everybody. And like I say, grade 9 taught me that, and the even younger ones taught me that. And I think, we have to do that. And
It's as easy as planting a seed,
it's it's that next
Yes.
generation, and it's not too young to start.
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
make
So
it age
the
appropriate.
technique. Yeah.
Send them on their way, give them that push, and see where they take us all.
Yes, I agree with you. As we're heading up into the top of the hour, promote yourself. What do you have coming up? How can people find you? Go, go, go.
Oh, I'm hard to find, but people always do that need to find me.
There we go.
I'm a
Yes.
digital hermit. I don't do social media. If people have something to report or need my assistance, they usually find me through the Shag Harbour Incident Society. Yeah. But what have I got coming up? Well, at the end of September 30th and October the 1st, I'm going to be in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. They're having UFO symposium. We got a bunch of big names coming. It's the annual Shag Harbour thing. We've had to move it to Yarmouth, and I'll tell you, we've got a lot of ticket sales. There isn't going to be a lot of room left, but now would be the time. We got some big names in the field. We got Nick Pope coming. We got Travis Walton, Paolo Harris.
Very nice.
Martin Willis, myself, Dean Alioto from Hollywood, right? And
nice.
again, it's a unique conference because you get to meet the experts. You can meet some of the actual eyewitnesses. You hear the experts, but the next day we put you in a bus and we take you right to the places, and there's no argument as to where it happened.
Wow,
the week
fantastic.
after that, I'm going to be with Elliot in Halifax at the Tower.
You are?
You've already flashed that, so
I've been doing that throughout the night. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're also a sponsor.
well,
We
That's
are.
right.
and that's where I'm looking forward to that. There were people there I haven't seen, and I don't do a lot of the paranormal conferences, but I have, and Elliot and I have worked together over the years on a couple of things. But there are people there I haven't seen in years. I did a presentation down in Boston. I think it was 07 or whatever, and where I met Lauren Coleman, and
Yes.
we have crossed paths with some of the people. I'm very much looking forward to that because it's a change for me. I like it.
Yes. Yes.
The other thing that's been
Nice.
happening is, since the book is done well, at the back of the book, here's how to get hold of me. And this is going to sound like a plug. In the back of the book, there's an email address where you can get hold of me, and I ask for clues or anybody that has any evidence. But you know
Okay.
what? I'm going to give you that email address so that you don't have to buy a book. It's not a plug, but feel free.
You should
on
plug the book.
Amazon.com.
Yeah.
Get the book.
Yeah, it's because
Support the artist. Yes, support the author always.
All that research, and
the
it's
book is Sweep Clear 5, NATO's
There you go.
UFO Encounter. And, it's about a case long before Shag Harbour. Couldn't be any more different than Shag Harbour.
Mhm.
But
And that was
yes,
a big one.
the address is this. It's shagharbor@yahoo.com. Pretty
Nice and
simple.
easy.
The Canadian spelling, so you got to put the U in Harbor, right?
Right.
And, any evidence, but if there's a question or how you get hold of me, you can do it in that old way.
Okay.
It's not as convenient as Facebook, but
Facebook's not a convenience anymore.
No.
and what happened to that other stuff? It's X, it's this, it's that. It's I don't know.
It's
I
too
don't
hard to
know.
keep
I
up with it.
tried. I try not to. I'm basically on social media because of the show.
Yeah, well, you know what? I tried it for a little while, and you know what people say? Why did you stop? You should try this one or that one. And I say,
Too much.
you know what it cut down on me? It cut down wedding proposals and death threats.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Didn't completely eliminate them, but it cut them down.
Yeah.
It's
And
hilarious.
yeah, it's just too easy to get hold of you. But no, since
Yeah.
that address has been that has already helped me in what I'm calling phase 2 of this investigation into the Shelburne case. People have sent in some great clues. I'm in the process of waiting for the next set, hopefully, of documents and logs from Ottawa. It looks like the operation was even bigger than I thought, and people have named other ships that were supportive, or so it goes on. I've always got things to do.
I love it.
I just got
I
to
love
find
it.
the time to do them.
I love it. Well, I really, I'm so happy that you came and joined us again. And it's always so delightful sharing space with you and listening to all of your stories. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to do it again. As you know, you have carte blanche. So we move
Cool.
forward. Yeah,
We'll do
love
it
it.
sometime. Yeah.
Yes, always.
Yeah.
Always.
It's
Thank
always a
you.
pleasure. Look, thanks for your interest, and
Always.
yeah. Yeah, to
Yes.
be honest, I came back. I hope I didn't scare you today, being out of town. I come back and I thought, oh yeah, that's the night, is it?
Yeah, it's like, wait a
But
minute. Yeah.
somebody
No,
wants
no,
me,
thank you for that. It was a
and I
bit of a
thought, geez,
scare,
I
but it's
wish
good.
that was tomorrow. I was actually going to go to bed early for a change,
Uh-oh.
see what sleep is like. But no, here I am, and it
Yeah.
was very painless, and it was a blast, and I wouldn't miss it.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Okay,
you.
Such an
Michelle,
honor having
Amelia, it
you.
was a pleasant pleasure, and
It's an
Yeah.
honor.
anytime.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay,
Thank
Enjoy
you.
bye
your
bye.
weekend.
All right.
Bye.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
long weekend. All right.
cool.
Good night.
All right.
Well, we have come to the end of another fantastic segment. Chris is just a wealth of information. And here in Canada, he is one of the go to guys and just really, really delves deep into his research. Anything that you read with his name behind it is going to be really well documented. So, big thank you to Chris Styles for joining us again. Remember to check him out at the Halifax Paranormal Symposium, October the 7th. He is one of the guest speakers there. They've got a great lineup. So check them out. And I think we're going to be doing another show with, of course, Elliot Van Dusen. And we've had Kim Moser on. Elliot's been on a few times. Daryl has been on. So, that's going to be again on the end of the month, I think. Sorry, I just can't see. Yeah, the 28th. Elliot and Daryl are coming back on. And that was a lot of fun the last time. So you guys are not going to want to miss that one. I know. And that's just like on the heels of the symposium. So it's
It
going to
was
be a
fun.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
Now for next week, it's going to be just an amazing week. We have one new face and one of our familiar favorites. But Wednesday night, we're welcoming for the first time Dr. Arlen Andrews Sr., who will be discussing his latest book. I can't even pronounce it, but I think it's Kalaram.
Well, if you can't pronounce it, I'm not going to have a shot.
Yog. I'm just putting it out there. I have no absolute clue because I don't want to insult it or butcher it. Lost Secrets of the Shadow Machine. It's based on his trips to the Sacred Valley of Peru. And it led to the discovery and analysis of an ancient solar calendar, which he reveals in the book. And that's just, that's just one thing. Like this man is just so well versed. It's unreal. So he's going to be here for the very first time. So big thank you to him. Like we're really looking forward to that. Thursday night, welcomes the return of our dear friend and frequent flyer, Preston Dennett, who has a new book out, people, called
Yep.
Humanoids and High Strangeness. And the little excerpt that he sent me says it presents 20 all new original and unpublished accounts of people who've had face to face contact with a variety of humanoids. The diversity of entities in this mind boggling. Grays, human looking ETs, mantids, reptilians, strange humanoids, angels, nature spirits, ghosts, poltergeists, demons, Bigfoot, supernatural entities of all kinds, hence high strangeness, I'm guessing. So it contains accounts of sightings, landings, and onboard UFO encounters. Many of the cases provide remarkable physical evidence. It goes on and on, guys. You're going to have to tune in to just to get the whole lowdown on this. It's just amazing. So thank you to everybody in the chat room who tuned in tonight. A lot of new faces as well. I know, remember, we have like 7 chat rooms. So it's nice to see everybody coming together. And I hope you guys in Canada, it is a long weekend. So be safe if you're out there, but have some fun because school starts next week. So this is sort of the last hurrah of the summer. So just, be safe. We want to see you here next week. All right. Good night, and thank you for tuning in.